I was 22 when this occurred. At that point, I had recently completed my undergraduate degree. I was in a transitional phase, seeking employment and taking on various tasks in my modest community, such as childcare, domestic cleaning, and miscellaneous errands. Essentially any opportunity that provided immediate compensation. A lady for whom I had previously cared for pets suggested my services to an acquaintance of her adjacent neighbors, an individual named Craig. He contacted me one afternoon and described his upcoming week-long journey, during which he required a house sitter to attend to his golden retriever, Max. He noted that Max was a sensitive animal who thrived with constant companionship, including overnight presence, rather than sporadic visits for feeding. The remuneration he proposed was somewhat above average, so I consented. I encountered Craig 2 days thereafter. He appeared to be in his late 40s, of considerable height, donning wire-framed spectacles and a lightweight jacket. Initially, nothing struck me as unusual about him. Perhaps he was excessively affable but not disconcerting. His residence was situated on the town's periphery, nestled within a forested enclave. The property was agreeable, though somewhat antiquated, featuring neutral carpeting and patterned drapery. Craig guided me through the essentials: the frequency for exercising Max, the location of the reserve key, and permissible items from the refrigerator. He indicated that I could occupy the guest quarters, positioned adjacent to the main salon on the ground level. I commenced the assignment on a Monday. The initial 2 evenings proceeded without incident. I viewed television in the salon, escorted Max on his nocturnal strolls, and retired in the guest chamber with him nestled at the bed's base. It was on the 3rd evening that anomalies emerged. I had been reclining on the bed, perusing content on my device, when an irregularity caught my eye. Upon the bureau opposite the bed, beside a modest luminaire, rested a digital timepiece. I recall pondering its incongruity with the room's aesthetic. It possessed a contemporary design, constructed of ebony polymer with a vivid azure-LED readout, whereas the surrounding decor evoked the early aughts. Something compelled me to examine it further, perhaps the illumination's reflection upon its facade. As I inclined nearer, I discerned a minute, impeccably circular ebony aperture above the digits. Initially, I presumed it a detector, yet its orientation aroused suspicion. The diminutive orifice was aligned precisely toward the bed. A profound unease enveloped me. I had encountered narratives regarding concealed surveillance in timepieces, though never firsthand. My thoughts accelerated. I lifted it, noting its unexpected heft and a subtle humming within, akin to a minuscule ventilator. I oriented it toward myself and peered into the aperture. At that instant, Max, who had been resting near the portal, abruptly raised his cranium and emitted a plaintive sound, from somewhere else in the house. Not the front door, but deeper inside. I heard the unmistakable sound of a door closing. Every hair on my body stood up. Craig wasn't supposed to be back until Sunday, and it was only Wednesday night. I froze, holding the clock in my hands, my heart pounding so hard it almost hurt. Then I heard slow footsteps on the hallway carpet. I hastily repositioned the timepiece and approached the portal, engaging the latch just as the steps ceased externally. Then Craig's timbre penetrated, composed yet marginally breathless. He asserted he had forgotten an item during his prior visit and requested access. I was rendered speechless. Shortly, he insisted it was innocuous, positing it as a motion detector for the canine, which he had omitted to disclose to avoid alarming me. I retreated from the portal, my palm muffling my breath. He urged me to emerge for a rational discussion, but upon my silence, his raps escalated to forceful blows. He demanded entry, his tone shifting from serene to acerbic and irate. Max commenced vocalizing and lunging at the barrier, exacerbating Craig's agitation. I surveyed the casement, sufficiently proximate to the terrain for egress, though secured. Thus, I grappled with the fastener, my digits trembling so severely that it necessitated 3 attempts. Behind me, Craig persisted in his assault, now proclaiming that noncompliance would prompt him to retrieve the chamber's key and summon authorities, alleging my unauthorized intrusion. I refrained from further audition. I propelled the casement ajar, egressed clumsily, and alighted upon the verger externally. Max attempted pursuit, his claws scraping the sill, yet he relented without leaping. I traversed the lateral enclosure and along the pebbled path to the thoroughfare. My device was in my possession, and I contacted my mother, residing a quarter-hour distant. I implored her immediate retrieval. Upon her arrival, I was concealed amid a grouping of postal receptacles. Craig's abode was obscured from that vantage, yet I vigilantly scanned my surroundings. I remained at my mother's for the night's duration. The ensuing morn, I obstructed Craig's communications and consulted legal counsel. The attorney advised that absent tangible substantiation, such as documentation of the surveillance or the apparatus itself, pursuing litigation would prove arduous. Even presuming the timepiece concealed a lens, Craig might assert it as a benign detector. Lacking proof, it devolved to testimonial conflict. I contemplated returning for photographic evidence, but counsel vehemently discouraged solitary re-entry, and the prospect of confronting Craig repelled me. Thus he evaded consequence. I received no compensation for the trio of evenings endured. The referrer ceased acknowledging my correspondences, leaving her awareness indeterminate. For subsequent weeks, nocturnal visions plagued me, envisioning awakening to a vigilant optic across the chamber. I commenced inspecting every chronometer, fire alarm, and framed image in my domicile. And I persistently reflect upon that instance of gazing into the minuscule ebony optic and the portal's closure in a purportedly vacant abode, implying his perpetual presence, observing via that mechanism. I reserved the Airbnb in late September, a week prior to when my partner Emma and I intended to visit her sibling in a quaint locale approximately 3 hours from our residence. I selected it for its affordability, proximity to her kin, favorable appraisals, and inviting imagery in the advertisement. An antique bipartite structure with an encircling veranda, ambient golden illumination in the salon, polished timber flooring evoking a narrative charm, and one minor annotation in the synopsis that I dismissed casually, a directive designating the subterranean repository as prohibited. I had lodged in accommodation where proprietors secured specific zones. It's customary for safeguarding personal effects, thus it scarcely merited attention. Yet upon arriving at the ingress just before dusk on the inaugural evening, the edifice appeared more dilapidated than depicted. Its isolation, with merely one distant neighbor visible, encircled by shadowy arboreal borders and a slender ingress route, prompted reconsideration. The proprietor, Alan, awaited us on the veranda ere we disembarked. He was elongated yet somewhat stooped, perhaps in his late 50s, with sparse ashen tresses meticulously arranged. He wore an impeccably creased plaid garment secured within his trousers. His grin was present, yet superficial, evoking rehearsed congeniality. His gaze protracted upon us during introductions. Though his inflection was amicable, an underlying authority permeated as he commenced the orientation. He escorted us through the vestibule, redolent of particulate and a saccharine essence, reminiscent of melted tallow, absent visible sources. The salon featured a capacious settee opposite an antiquated screen. The culinary area was tidy yet obsolete. Ascending, the solitary boudoir contained an ample berth beneath a ventilator and a compact armoire with reflector. Descending, Alan paused at a portal proximate to the kitchen and gestured toward its robust hasp. In a more imperative cadence, he reiterated its inaccessibility, designating it his depository, devoid of necessity for our intrusion. No levity accompanied this. He proceeded to indicate supplementary linens in the lavatory before bidding adieu and departing. Post-departure, Emma and I organized our effects, prepared infusion, and reclined on the veranda momentarily, attuned to orthopteran choruses and foliar susurrations. Upon retiring, the tranquility verged on disquieting. No vehicular hum, no remote dialogues, merely absolute hush. Sometime post-midnight, a subdued impact resonated from beneath. I halted and attended for recurrence, yet none ensued. I rationalized it as structural accommodation. The subsequent dawn, we procured sustenance locally, perused emporia, and convened with Emma's sibling midday. We lingered until twilight, then returned for repast and cinematic diversion. Circa 2:00 ante-meridiem, I roused for ablutions. En route back to the boudoir, I arrested mid-ascent upon detecting a scraping from the subterranean level, akin to ponderous mass traversing coarse substrate. It persisted briefly, ceased, then recommenced. Initially, I surmised Alan's return for retrieval, yet he had affirmed his absence throughout. I lingered auditory until cessation, then entered the boudoir and murmured to Emma if vigilant. She affirmed and corroborated the auditory. We sustained wakefulness another half hour sans recurrence. The ensuing evening intensified. Post-excursion fatigue, yet circa 2:30 ante-meridiem disturbances resumed. Not scraping, but ambulations. Several sequential, then intermission, then additional. Each hiatus protracted sufficiently to suggest attentive surveillance. Emma murmured, perceiving respiration amid intervals. My pulse accelerated, yet I eschewed movement to evade detection. Thus, we reclined alert, fixated ceilingward until dawn. By the tertiary morn, the ambience altered palpably. We pursued leisurely pursuits externally, yet re-entry evoked oppressive density. I inspected the subterranean portal diurnally. It remained secured, yet proximal olfaction revealed faint malodor, like stagnant humidity infused with acridity. That evening, disturbances initiated prematurely circa midnight. Initially, subtle metallic tinkling, as if alloy contacting rigidity. Then ambulations intermittently for nearly 60 minutes. Emma conversed minimally pre-slumber. The quaternary evening precipitated crisis. During nocturnal preparations, Emma halted coiffure and queried if the overhead fire sensor appeared anomalous. Initially unapparent, yet upon elevating via berth for scrutiny, I noted a minuscule, flawlessly circular ebony speck centrally, more lustrous than environs. Apprehension surged. I procured a seat, dismantled the unit, revealing an operational compact imager with active indicator. Emma perched pallid and mute as I canvassed the chamber, uncovering another optic via mural perforation near the armoire reflector, both oriented berthward. Resolution ensued. We hastily amassed possessions sans order, vacated sans proprietor dialogue, proceeding to proximate fueling depot for constabulary summons. 2 officers met us there. We explained everything, the noises, the cameras, the locked basement, and they followed us back to the house. The front door was unlocked. Technically, we were still allowed in the place as we paid for 4 days. The police followed us inside and seized all the evidence, including the cameras, I assume, the memory cards, and any recording equipment they could find. They also took our statement in detail, asking if any strange events took place during our stay. That's when we mentioned hearing weird noises both nights from the basement. When we showed them the basement door, we were shocked to see that it was now wide open, but it was pitch black down there. We told them that this door was locked before and that the host was very sketchy about not going down there. So the officers went down the stairs to investigate. Moments later, we heard voices, raised voices. There was some kind of commotion going on down there, and it quickly became clear what was happening. The officers then called us down and asked if this was the host, and to our horror, it was Alan. He was apparently hiding in a closet in the basement. In this closet was a monitor, which we could only guess was being fed the footage from the basement. The police seized this as well. Alan was placed under arrest almost immediately, and he was charged criminally by the state for criminal trespass and invasion of privacy. We didn't have to testify in court or anything. The police just sent our statements to the prosecutor. I believe Airbnb basically bribed us with a voucher in hopes that we wouldn't share our bad experience. We took the voucher obviously, but that hasn't stopped us from telling people about this horrific experience. It's really been something that's had a lasting effect on Emma, and we don't trust rentals or Airbnbs anymore and lately just stick to hotels. Music. My name is Joe and this happened about a week ago. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment with my roommate Eric. I didn't know him before moving in. We met through a Facebook housing group. He seemed normal enough when we first met to check the place out. He was quiet, polite, and kind of awkward, but not really in a bad way. At the time, I thought that would be a good thing because I wasn't looking for a best friend, just someone responsible enough to help pay rent and not trash the place. For the first couple of months, it was fine. We had opposite work schedules. I worked a regular 9-to-5 office job and he worked at some warehouse on the late shift. Because of that, I barely saw him. Most of the time when I was leaving in the morning, his door would be shut. And at night, when I came home, he was usually gone. We'd cross paths once or twice a week, usually just exchanging a few words in the kitchen or living room. It was nothing special, but it worked. Then I started noticing little things in my room that made me feel off. The first time it happened, I came home late and saw that my closet door was open. I usually keep it closed because I don't like seeing my clothes sticking out, but I figured maybe I had left it that way that morning. A few days later, I noticed my desk chair turned slightly toward the bed. I never sit in it that way. Again, I brushed it off and thought maybe I was just not paying attention. Still, it put a strange feeling in my stomach, like somebody had been in my room. One Saturday morning, I was cleaning. I wiped the shelves, dusted, and then started on the window. That's when I saw it. Up in the corner where the wall met the ceiling, there was this little black dot. I thought it was maybe a screw or a hole in the wall, but when I got closer, I froze. It was a tiny camera, a small wireless camera pointed straight at my bed. My hand shook as I pulled it off the wall. It wasn't even hidden well, just stuck with a little piece of adhesive. It had a spot for a memory card, but the card was missing. I just stood there holding it, feeling sick. I thought about all the nights I had been in here sleeping, changing clothes, even being intimate with women. The only person who could have put it there was Eric. He was the only other one with access to my room. At that moment, he wasn't home. His door was closed and the apartment was quiet. I stood in the hallway staring at his door with my heart pounding. I told myself not to do it, but curiosity won. I slowly turned his doorknob and opened it. His room smelled stale, like old food and dirty laundry. The blinds were shut and the room was dark even though it was the middle of the day. His bed was unmade and his desk was cluttered with papers, unopened mail and change. I searched around a little, half expecting to find another camera or maybe recordings on his laptop, but there was nothing obvious. Just a messy room. I closed the door and went back to my room, but I couldn't get rid of the uneasiness. I decided to test him. I put the camera in my nightstand drawer under some socks. My plan was simple. If he came looking for it, then I'd know for sure it was him who planted it. For 2 nights, nothing happened. I still felt tense, but since there weren't any signs, I started to think that maybe I was overthinking the whole thing. Then came the 3rd night. I woke up at around 3:00 in the morning. At first I wasn't sure why, but then I heard a noise. It was soft, like wood sliding against wood. Then I realized it was coming from right beside me from my nightstand drawer. I opened my eyes a little, pretending to still be asleep. In the faint light coming through the blinds, I saw a figure. It was Eric. He was standing in my room, bent over my nightstand, rummaging through the drawer where I had hidden the camera. I felt my chest tighten and my heart beat so loud I was sure he could hear it. I stayed still, not knowing what to do. And then he stopped. He froze and just stood there completely still. Slowly, he turned his head toward my bed. He was looking straight at me. For a moment, I thought maybe he wasn't sure if I was awake, but then he spoke. He said he knew I was awake. I felt ice run down my spine as he said that. Then he asked me what I had done with it. I sat up quickly, my fear turning to anger. I demanded to know why he put a camera in my room. He stared at me and told me it was because he thought I was stealing from him. I told him that was ridiculous, that it made no sense. I said he had aimed the camera at my bed and that it was one of the most sickest things I've ever seen. He tried to tell me he only wanted proof, but I didn't buy it. I told him he was lying and that he had been spying on me. We started yelling at each other. He kept repeating that I was overreacting. I told him I was going to report him to the landlord and maybe even the police. My voice was shaking with both fear and rage. Finally, I yanked open the drawer, grabbed the camera and held it up. I told him that this was proof and that he was never getting it back. I stormed out of my room, walked into the kitchen, and threw the camera straight into the garbage, thinking I broke it. I told him to stay out of my room and that the next day I would be telling the landlord everything. Eric stood in the hallway with his fists clenched, and he was just staring at me with a blank expression. Then he turned and walked back into his room without another word. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I sat on the couch with the TV on, too afraid he might come back into my room. Every little sound in the apartment made me jump. When the sun finally came up, I checked the garbage can. The camera was gone. That was a week ago. I told the landlord what happened. He said he would look into it, but so far nothing has been done. Eric still lives here. We don't speak, but the way he looks at me when we pass each other makes my skin crawl. It's like he's waiting for me to say or do something. I don't know why he really put the camera in my room. His excuse about me stealing was an obvious lie. I don't know what he wanted to record or what he was planning to do with it. And honestly, I don't want to know. But every night when I lay down in bed, I can't shake the feeling that there are more cameras hidden around me, maybe in places I wouldn't think to check. I scoured the entire room and couldn't find any. But still, the thought does linger in my mind. Last night, I was awake late and heard footsteps come down the hallway and then stopped right outside my door. For over a minute, there was silence except for slight cracks in the wood floor outside my door from the pressure of him standing there. He stood there like a creep for a couple of minutes until I finally heard his footsteps move away from the door. I'm looking into moving out. I'm also trying to figure out if pressing charges for invasion of privacy or something is feasible. Considering I didn't even think to take a picture of the camera or record the confrontation or anything. I don't even have any texts from him admitting to placing the camera there. I've got literally nothing. But anyway, wish me luck in this situation because I'm not sure what the outcome will be.